Welcome to the Healing Room. I'm Lavonda Handy, licensed marriage and family therapist and founder of Truth Center for Health and Healing. This podcast is a space where we slow down, get honest, and reflect on truths that shape us. Here, you'll find real conversations, solo reflections, and stories that center healing culturally, personally, and collectively. And just so we're clear, this podcast isn't therapy, and I'm not your therapist. My hope is that every time you leave this space, you'll feel empowered, seen, and inspired to keep growing. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Now let's get into it. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Healing Room. I am Lavonda Handy, founder and therapist of Truth Center for Health and Healing. And if you have been with us for the last few weeks, you know that we have been talking about surrendering. We have been talking about slowing down. We have been talking about being truly doing what's truly in alignment with who you are. And for me, this is fantastic, right? Like being able to really slow down, being able to really connect. But what I want to talk about is something that really keeps coming out for me, and that is excitement. And specifically, how excitement does not always mean strategy, right? And so when you're working really hard, when you're connecting with something, when you're feeling good about just the goals and the way that you're moving, excitement doesn't always mean, and excitement and passion does not always mean the right strategy. It can mean impulse, right? And this is something that is a personal lesson of myself, of knowing how to know the difference between that excitement and what passion is versus what it means to be impulse. And these lessons they really have actually taught me to be a much, much better leader. And so something that's really personal is like my business, right? Truth Center is something that I have built from the ground up. It's not really something that I was like, "Ah, I want to be a group practice owner." Initially, I had not even wanted this. And if you had listened to last week's episode and how I discovered and got into being a group practice owner and having to learn how to surrender myself, Truth Center kind of came out of a desperation and just being in the right spot in my life, right? And so, what I have been leaning into as this practice was built, I opened it in 2020, like literally height of pandemic, right? Because what the country sent down in March of 2020, and I opened the practice in July, all virtual. And it was a time where everyone needed support, right? And it was a really a hard time for like Black Lives Matter and different themes, is that like that we were suffering, and therapy was something that people were finally open to going to, and especially therapy virtually. They're like, what? This is an option. And I also can't leave my house. I'm alone with my own thoughts. So this might be the best opportunity for me to lean into that part. Right. And so naturally, I was busy very quickly. I also took insurance. So that was another door opening for insurances, really offering an opportunity for folks to come in and get the treatment and support, because once again we were all suffering at this time. And so I quickly transitioned from my previous full-time employer to be full-time self-employed. And in that moment, what was also happening was there was a lot of people coming through the door. And very quickly, as the person that I am, of like wanting to help people, the person that I am of not wanting to leave people feeling abandoned and alone, especially during a time like that. And I needed to make sure that the services that I was able to provide was available. So we had a wait list initially, and I was like, I cannot take on more people by myself, right? Because then at that point, I'm not the only one that, rather, the clients that I'm serving are not the only ones that are going through this pandemic and this really uncertain time. It's also myself, right? I am also a part of this community where we are unsure of what our next steps are. And so my next step for me was like, okay, because I can't do this by myself, I need to hire people, right? And so very quickly, I hired, right? And this is also a part of me. If I love somebody, if there's a good energy, if that energy is amazing in their interview, their skills are really amazing, it's a yes for me. And as a brand new business owner and someone that is never been solely in charge of running the business, I hired. And at one point, I've hired like more than one person at one time, which was probably my impulse and my want to not abandon or say no or hurt somebody's feelings, right? Like, I think that is a crucial part of being a business owner is that we have to know when to say no, right? And at that point, I was the excitement and the passion for like helping people and not only helping people as a therapist, but now I get to help people as a supervisor and developing their skills. I get to help people in the community by providing a job. That feels amazing to be able to show up in that different way to be able to support someone. Here's the thing I didn't know. I didn't know the impact of being a business owner and hiring quickly and what that meant. Because initially, my clinicians were 1099 employees, which means they file their taxes very differently. I don't pay for them. I didn't go to school to be a business person, didn't go to school for marketing. So when it's time for me to make sure I'm getting clinicians filled up, they're not getting filled up. And so I'm feeling this pressure, right, of taking care of these folks. And I can't because once again, I've now hired them way too fast and faster than the clients are coming into the door. I have the most loyal clinicians because they just stayed with me. Sometimes they have other jobs, sometimes they don't, right? But they feel supported and confident in me to be able to do my job. And so we were going along and it was fine. I think, and in those moments, it felt as though like I was growing in my leadership, right? Because not necessarily because the clients were coming in the door and I was figuring out how to bring in more clients, but I could see the clients that my clinicians had, they were growing in their clinical skills, right? And I can see them developing and I can see them moving along and I can feel their growth happening. But there's this part of me that knows that having the business be stable is important, but I'm not necessarily sure I understand how that is supposed to happen. But at one point, there happens to be a reality check for me, right? Of when I have all these clinicians and they're not full enough. And I have to figure out a way to make a change. Why? Not because the business is like necessarily super unstable, but like the stability of the practice is not as much as I want it to be. It's not in the place that it needs to be in order to sustain if a major crisis happens with the practice. But then I started to feel it personally, right? There became a point where I had to kind of check myself because not only were the finances of the practice not stable, but my personal finances weren't either. And so I really had to take a reality check for myself. I had to look within and think about if I can't take care of my family, what is the point of this business? Right? So I really had to get conscious of that because at this point, right, I'm having feelings of shame, I'm feeling guilt, stress, I'm feeling frustrated, I'm feeling embarrassed. This is something that I've built and this is something that is really important to me. And I have yet to figure out a way to sustain it in a way that allows everyone to be okay, including my family. And this is funny because my husband, at one point before I started the business, even before we were married, he asked me, is this something that I can do to sustain an income? Right. And yes, in reality, as a solar practitioner, I can sustain an income. I can get the clients to come in, but there is a difference of when I need to be able to sustain my own caseload, but also sustain the caseload of others. So when it comes into taking care of others, I had to figure out what was needed. And this is what I did. And this is how I've learned to move differently as a business owner. I had to sit with myself and I had to think about that this is might be the time to start asking for help. This might be the time where I really recognize that this is not built just by me, right? And I don't think before I was like not trying to ask other people. I had folks that I talked to, other colleagues that I talked to on a regular basis, but I needed to switch my business mind to a grander scheme, right? To a more long term of what it would look like to have my 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, 5 years. I had to think this through, right? I had to sit with what it would really look like to take this on in a way that would allow me to feel able that I was really able to sustain my family and my business. And so I had to make these decisions, but I can no longer make these decisions alone. My impulse, passion could not just be for me, right? And so now I took to creating my cabinet, is what I like to call it. Anybody who I can call to really have deep conversations with before I make major decisions and start planning of what things should look like, what I want them to look like, and who do I want to be on that path with me. And I have several folks that I call, and I call them for different reasons, right? And I want you all to think about too is your cabinet is for a multitude of different things, right? So it's not just one person that you should ask, like, oh, what do you think I should do? But like someone who can truly, you can turn to and that you trust, right? You trust their opinion and you know how they move. And it doesn't have to be in the same business as you. That is also a thing that I recognize, right? Like I have one cabinet member and she's my people cabinet member. Like when I want to discuss people and their energies and their vibes and how they're moving, that's the person I call. There's other folks that I have. All right, this is like the business thing. Here are my numbers. This is what this looks like. Help me like work that out so I can make the right decision and not go off of instincts. And this comes to when folks are like, "Oh, I'm not asking anybody else for help because all the reasons." But when we exist up here by ourselves and we make passionate, impulsive, excited decisions, sometimes we haven't thought through all the parts that go along with that. And so now I have my cabinet of people that I can turn to. I can turn to them and they ask me questions that potentially I have not asked myself yet. And I remind myself that excitement is beautiful, right? It's great to be excited. It's amazing to be feel passionate about an idea, but strategy sustains you. Even me starting this podcast, I am going very like low excitement, low passion because I got to think about my return on investment, right? I could go out, I can run a studio, I can pay a producer to do all these things. But what's my return on investment if I spend 5K versus 500? Right? And so sometimes when we have to be really mindful of when is it okay to do low stakes, moderate, or high. Keep that in mind, right? Because not every decision, right? And this is what I had to take on for myself. Every decision that I make doesn't just impact me. It impacts the business, it impacts my team, it impacts our family, it impacts our clients, and it impacts my family. And this doesn't just have to be if you're a business owner, this could be anything that you're doing, right? I say this all the time when parents have to make like moves to a different house, a different school district, a different country. Those decisions impact their kids, right? And so maybe the kids don't have the final decision, but what would it look like to include them in it so everybody knows and understands what the impact is, right? And so every decision that I make, I run it by my husband because he will ask all the questions. He will ask all the questions that I have never thought about asking myself in order to help me slow down, right? In these moments, I have now learned to teach myself patience. I've learned to teach, really sit with and learn how to have more discernment. That's been really impactful, right? And now I feel much more confident in my excitement because it's not just excitement, it is not just passion, it is definitely strategy. And so, I haven't gone to school to be a business owner. I didn't go to business school. I went to school to be a therapist. And in grad school, when you go for therapy, psychology, there is not one business course. I don't even know if they give you the options of like what you can do after you get this degree. Like, but you're just kind of like sent out. So, any recommendations for any psychology, marriage and family therapy, social work, professional counselor, mental health worker, offer a business class. Let folks know their options, right? Because I didn't know how to read a P&L sheet. That is for sure, right? And so being a good steward of my business is a part of my healing, right? That is a part of my healing to understand how finances work. It's a part of my healing to know that asking for help also and managing the rates of the practice, right? That doesn't make me a greedy person, right? It doesn't make me not care about the mission or the people, but it helps sustain it, right? Money does help sustain this practice. And we all deserve to work without struggling. I think that is the constant thing that I am learning of that my excitement can go alongside my strategy and my planning, right? I think that as someone who very much works off excitement and impulse, like when I feel something, y'all, I feel it in my gut. And so I like to now take my gut feelings and put them on the table to say like how is this going to work? How can I allow this plan, this strategy be executed in a way where we can, not guaranteed success, but we know our options. And that's the important piece. I want to always know my options. And even though I'm passionate about something, I can do it successfully. So here's what I want you to consider, right? Where in your life are you confusing excitement with strategy? Where are you saying yes because you can and not because you should? And so this week, before you make any big decisions, right, I want you to pause. Ask yourself, is this alignment? Is it adrenaline? And if you're a heart led leader like me, remember the mission can't thrive if you're a depleted leader, right? And so turn to your cabinet. And if you don't have one, now is the time to identify those people. Who is your cabinet? Who are your trusted folks that you can turn to, that you can reference of like, when you are about to make major, big life decisions, who are your people that you work through that with? And even if you're not turning to those folks for their like absolute opinion and their complete advice, but even someone that's just going to ask you more questions so you once again know all your options. And write it down. Write it down. Take those questions, write it down where you can slow down, where you can turn to your cabinet, where you need to run the numbers. Where are you turning to excitement and impulse versus strategy and planning? And then decide. Then make your decisions. Because sometimes when we make decisions out of urgency, once again, that can lead in spaces that we don't want them to. So, thank you for spending this time with me in the healing room. Remember, this isn't therapy. I'm not your therapist, but it is a space for truth, reflection, and growth. And if this episode spoke to you, please share it with somebody, like it, especially folks that are business owners or just a therapist or just a heart-led leader. Maybe you're a heart-led leader in your church. Maybe you're a heart-led leader in a community space. Share it with somebody that could benefit from this. Until next time, keep honoring your truth. Thanks for joining me in the healing room. If today's conversation spoke to you, be sure to follow, rate, and share the podcast with someone who could use a little healing too. Remember, this space is for reflection and inspiration, not therapy. If you need support, please connect with a licensed provider in your area. To learn more about me and my team, visit truthcenterhh.com. Until next time, keep honoring your truth.